Well, that's another, you brought up the churches. And one of the things that I didn't realize until I had started to get to know the community a little bit more was that Linden used to have, is the highest number of churches in a given town, or what was it exactly?
It's actually a mistaken piece. There was at one point, and I'm trying to remember which magazine it was, erroneously commented that Linden had the highest number of churches per capita of any town in North America. Or any incorporated city in North America.
Gotcha.
Which actually isn't true. There's another one back in the eastern Midwest that has higher level per capita.
Okay.
And at the time, the churches that were counted in Linden were church buildings immediately surrounding, so it wasn't just within other churches are drawn. However, if you were to say Linden had the highest number of congregations per capita at the time, and I would still not be surprised if this held true in North America, because many of the churches had multiple congregations meeting there. From a standpoint that they weren't even necessarily of the same denomination.
Right. They were just sharing a facility.
They were just sharing a church facility. Exactly. And at a time of reducing levels of congregations, renting out your church was a great way to make some money.
Yeah, no kidding. So to that point then, because not every town or city gets to say that they're running for that kind of ranking in the U.S. for such a prominent...
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Linden never officially ran for that.
No,
that's,
sure.
That's just the end result of the Dutch impact.
So and then that brings up the other point. So Linden, when I was first introduced to it, was that it's religious and that it's Dutch. Can you break down for those who perhaps a little less familiar with Linden specifically, because it seems to have perhaps the most rich history of the Whatcom County that I've come to where, I've never heard anyone's super passionate for Bellingham history. But I hear.
Oh, you'd haven't delved into the right aspects.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, Bellingham's got quite a great history. I hate to say right now, there is Bellingham doesn't want to look at its history very closely. I think the same way that Seattle doesn't want to look at its history very closely, in that Bellingham considers itself to be very like Seattle, a modern city.
Right.
With modern problems and modern, type of thing. They were never an Old West city. Seattle and Bellingham were centers of whiskey smuggling well before Prohibition ever occurred. The amount of money that you could make smuggling whiskey from Vancouver to Seattle was tremendous. And there were any number of whiskey barons that operated in shadow aspects of Seattle's history. You know, I mean, it's not all that great, clean, simple, easy history type of thing. It's the kind of history I find interesting. It's the Yellowstone history.
Sure.
It's the OK Corral history. It's the history of, there were some people that were not really acting very good per se, but they made it real interesting. So, I mean, a lot of people don't really. I mean, during Prohibition, Seattle had the largest Prohibition gang guy on the West Coast. You would think that it would be LA or San Diego or something like that, but it was some guy who was I can't for life remember him, but he ran the amount of whiskey he ran up and down the West Coast and alcohol up and down the West Coast during Prohibition, and he was filthy stinking rich.
No kidding.
And he had effectively a pardon from the governor of Washington State for anything he did. I mean, he bought off so many people.
How much money was this guy making?
Oh, he was making easily estimated $1 million a day.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And this is in the 1920s, 30s.
Right.
Right. So you can imagine what that would translate out in today.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. He was, for all intents and purposes, the equivalent of a Colombian drug lord. And that was the West Coast. On the East Coast, it gets even crazier.
Oh, for sure. Because that was during the time of Al Capone and all those guys, wasn't it?
Exactly. So you got Chicago. I mean, when you take a look at, I don't know today's gangster history very well, but the gangs of prohibition, the ones that we know the most about, put today's gang drug runners to shame for the amount of money and product they were moving.
No kidding.
Back then.
I know this is probably not an entirely accurate or fair way to put it, but it always seemed like the gangsters from the 30s and the 40s, they seemed so much more classier than the gangsters we have now.
They just, no, I got it. When you really start looking at it, you get things like the Valentine's Day Massacre, and they were just as nasty.
Oh, for sure.
It's just, I think we know more now because
just everyone knows
broader media coverage.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Good heavens. You could probably find out what Donald Trump ate for breakfast today if you looked hard enough.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, there's the one scene in, what is the one about Al Capone with Sean Connery and, where he beats a couple of his good old boys with a baseball bat at their big. He gets them all together to say how great they're doing, except for two guys that have pissed him off, and he just beats them to death right there with a baseball bat in front of everybody else to prove a point. Yeah, the prohibition got romanticized in the 40s, 50s, and 60s,
right?
And it actually wasn't very pretty at all.
But you know what? It was great for the Canadians.
Oh, Canadians have always benefited from smuggling whiskey into the U.S. Absolutely.
There's an island. It's off of Newfoundland, and to this day, it's still one of the hottest hubs for trafficking of illicit goods. And like to this day, a lot of alcohol, a lot of weapons, probably other things as well. And like, it's an open secret. The Canadian government knows what's going on. I'm forgetting the name of this small island because it's only like a couple hundred people there.
Right.
But it's one of the most shipped to locations in the world. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody there is consuming that much airmail.
No. The island of 400 people needs 12 tons of whiskey. Like, all right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's Newfoundland. It makes sense, I guess. Oh.
But so getting back to the Dutch aspect.
Yes.
The one thing to remember with Linden is that Linden was actually settled like pretty much the vast majority of Western early settlements, just random, mainly immigrants,
Right.
coming in from the east, and they arrived on the West Coast. And the one thing I got to say is the piece that we don't understand these days when it comes to immigration. I'm not just talking about the immigration issues going on today.
Sure.
But like immigration even back then, the idea was these were people that were coming, even if they weren't immigrants, they were already U.S. citizens, but the people that settled the West, their life was so bad at the East for whatever reason, whether it was an economic issue, whether it was a political or spiritual issue, personal issue, their life was so bad they were willing to risk everything, including their family, by dragging them along in hopes that maybe in the middle of nowhere, they're going to find a better life.
Yeah.
There's literally a lot of them were one step short of committing suicide. And that's what drove Western expansion. That's how bad the Eastern U.S. was at that point in time. And it was how bad Europe was at that point in time. It was how bad, a lot of places in China, coastal China, at that point in time. Hence the reason that there were so many Chinese workers coming over to try and find work in the U.S. It was what we think of as the U.S. As the Western U.S. Some of the hardest history in the world was actually the dull end of the stick.
Really?
It was the clean end of the stick because the people coming here actually had it worse than the Wild West. So
that's a way to frame it. Yeah. It's somewhat related, I guess, because the environment here just gets hit with a lot of storms. It's always wet. And when you're living in a time of day where you have to really worry about diseases, that could be really bad. It's like during World War II when they would go to, I think it was New Guinea specifically. It was the worst front of the entire war.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it didn't get bombed nearly as much as anywhere else, but it was just the disease.
I was going to say, what 80% of the casualties were due to cholera or malaria?
Yeah.
Just parasites.
And like For what it's worth, in the Midwest where it's all desert, not too many parasites, I don't think.
I think you're right. Not a biologist or environmentalist, but yeah, I think you're probably correct. There's way less parasites there than there are here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's West Coast is lovely. It is beautiful, but yeah, coming here when it was untouched and unclaimed, well, unclaimed, big quotation marks for those watching, different world for sure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's one of the things too that, it's to, and this is where, say that I don't mean to disparage any cultural belief in religion or a God. And I fully understand that for many Native nations, just like Christians, just like Hindus, just like any other religion, there's a belief in a creator, and that creator gave them permission to be here. Unfortunately, I'm an archaeologist, and so I temper that with a lot of actual what's in my hand. And what seems to be on the table of archaeology is that there were no human beings born in North America.
Yeah.
Every human being, they have since been born, but prior to the first human being setting foot in North America, there weren't even monkeys. Well, that's not true. I guess they did find a North American primate.
Did they?
Recently? Yeah, something down in Central Asia or Central America. Yeah, they're literally calling it something like the American monkey.
Oh.
Old fossil.
Oh.
Old fossil.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But it's like the only known primate fossil in North America prior to a certain period of time. Anyway, that sort of a piece, but that every human being that came to North America early on, again, it's that aspect. Their life sucked so much wherever they were willing to risk the absolute unknown because that could, just the possibility of it being better was better.
And that's funny because that compounds on this idea. I guess one of the growing ideas with how people came to the Americas is that it used to be that they traveled through this land bridge that would form between Alaska and Russia. And perhaps that happened to a certain degree, but it seems like the growing idea is that it was actually Sino-Asians that were just island hopping and they just kept on going east.
And coastal, because the one thing that was, my archaeology teacher was big on this because she was, at the time, it was a brand new concept, but with an ice age, the water levels are lower.
Yeah.
And you have this beautiful coastline that in many cases extends 20 miles beyond what it is today along the West Coast and along China and up through Manchuria and Alaska and such. And, she'd always sit there and wonder how many village sites, how many production sites, lithic sites were under 400 feet of water. And, because the problem that they have with the land bridge is that so far, even with all the things they've found, the part that they haven't been able is to find settlements or village sites or any sites along the land bridge route that would justify the number of people that actually they're finding as early Clovis and archaeological settlements down in South America along the coast.
Oh, sure.
But sure, if you had somebody that's coming by boat along the coast and just bouncing along and people hopping their way across, that would suddenly explain this huge amount of people that have settled there within a given period of time. And the reason you can't find anything along this land bridge, because the land bridge was the minority route, not the majority route.
No, for sure. And again, it continues just to attest the point where if people are going to leave where they're living, that takes a lot. And if you're going to hop an island, that probably takes a lot. And if you're going so far as to go to, travel halfway across the world to another continent, that is specifically South America, one of the most inhospitable tropical areas in the world, that takes a huge amount.
Right. And in addition to that, you are jumping and abandoning all your spirits.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, you don't have an overarching God that's going to protect you anywhere in the world. You've got your animists at the space. So what if the spirits in the new area don't like you?
Yeah.
It's an entirely different environment. What do you even eat? I couldn't do it. It would be like going to Mars these days. Basically you're saying, I'm going to leave everything I know and never come back. just in hope that it's going to be a little bit better.
Yeah, because where I am is currently so inhospitable for whatever reason. I have no choice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, it sort of puts the whole concept of immigration not just into North America, but immigration anywhere. You know, the reason any reason, you know, that people would immigrate, even going back to the Scythians. Why did the Scythians move from Central Asia to Western Asia? Well, because China was making it real hard on the guys next to them.
Yeah. Well, it's even like as another example, some people have put forward that the Scandinavians, the reasons that they kept leaving Scandinavia to go raiding was initially, at least, because of the food shortages, and they had no choice; they had to do it.
Yeah.
Then eventually might have just been pirating for the sake of pirating, but then that was a different thing.
Problem is, after you start raiding something and it works out, then
like,
pirating becomes lucrative.
These monks stink at fighting back. This is great.
And they've got gold.
Oh,
and
God.
more importantly, food.
Okay, so